I have a whole chapter in the book.
Yeah.
I think there's some lessons. The core of it was we had seen this significant increase in our valuation. I think that 2 years before the merger, the value of the company was $20 billion. 2 years later, it was $160 billion. So there was some financial diversification, having a broader series of businesses. TimeWarner, I think, had $30 billion of revenue, $10 billion of profit across a whole platform of a portfolio.
And you guys had what at that time?
$5 billion of revenue, maybe $1 billion of profit.
Right.
And so we were able to merge and have with 55% of the combined company. And so that's from a financial standpoint, it makes sense. But also from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense. We needed to path to broadband. They owned the largest cable systems. They needed a path to the digital future because they were struggling to figure out how to...
You negotiated a deal with $1 billion in profits with a company with $10 billion, and you wound up with 55%.
Right. It was the right deal. It was the right deal for us, and I think it was the right deal for them.
Clearly the right deal for the person who got 55%.
The lesson, though, and I talk about in the book, is that the idea of the merger, and even the things we talked about when we announced the merger, like digital music, this is years before Apple launched the iPod, and some of the things with Netflix and YouTube were things that this company could have done, but it was unable to get organized to do it. And it's ultimately about people and culture and execution. And I cite in the book a Thomas Edison quote, "Vision without execution is hallucination."
Right.
That sort of summarizes the merger for me.
Yeah.
I think it was a good idea. It was certainly good for our shareholders. It would have been good for Time Warner shareholders as well if we'd been able to execute against that and take what was the leading company in the internet and the leading company in the media, cable, telecommunications world and really together invent the
It was
future.
the right idea. It was a great set of assets. Why were you not put in charge of all this? This was, to me, when I was in my 20s and I watched this whole thing go down, and I was like, Steve Case is going to be in charge of everything. Like, you at that point were the most powerful executive on the planet, but they put Jerry Levine in charge of this. And I said, this guy doesn't know this world. This guy's not a visionary. Who is this guy? Well, how did he wind up in charge and not you?
Well, the simple answer is when I proposed the merger, I offered to step aside as CEO because I believed that it would be hard enough to get this deal done for the reason you mentioned, but it would be impossible if I was proposing that I take over the company. So on day one, in the first 30 seconds of talking to him about the potential merger, I said, if you agree to have a discussion about merging your companies, I would agree to step aside as CEO so you could run the combined company. The deal wouldn't have happened without that. And so it was a critical ingredient. I believed it was the right thing for AOL shareholders, so was willing to do that.
It had to be the right thing for AOL shareholders because what people forget is you guys had this tremendous run, but then broadband came out. And let's face it, you did not have the broadband assets.
Right. We did not have the broadband. And we even tried on the policy side to create sort of a dynamic around open access. The phone companies were required to open up their networks for narrowband dial-up. The cable companies were not. And so there was a real risk that AOL would kind of hit the wall as the transition to broadband happened. So there was a whole host of reasons why the merger made sense, which is why I agreed to step aside to facilitate the merger.
When you're watching it, though, in those years after, I think you have enough time that you can talk about it now without... Is it emotionally hard for you to reconcile it?
Not really. It's disappointing. No. It's frustrating. But I'm much more focused on the future. Much more focused on what we're doing now at Revolution. Much
I'd be
more
so
focused
bitter.
on the. No,
I would be so bitter, Steve. I would sit there and I would like break things because it was so perfectly teed up to be the company of the future. Was there like years of therapy or just you having to like take long walks on the beach to figure out why this thing collapsed and you weren't in charge? Be honest.
Not really. No, because I stepped aside 15 years ago, something like that. And most of the last 15 years I've been investing through Revolution. And now nearly 100 entrepreneurs in a variety of sectors.
Yeah, one
of the things I'm most enthusiastic about, and I devoted a chapter of the book, is this rise of the rest phenomenon. It's odd sitting here in San Francisco to talk about this, but I think the next wave of entrepreneurship is not going to just be in San Francisco and not just in New York and not just in Boston. It's going to be all over the country. And there's already some evidence of that. And that's been our focus, is backing these cities and backing these entrepreneurs and trying to lift up entrepreneurship. So to me, it's not about relitigating the past. It's about kind of leaning into the future and trying to be positioned for the third wave, including with Revolution.
Hey, everybody. I want to talk about one of my favorite addictions, Audible. I listen to audiobooks constantly because I love nonfiction, I love learning, and I'm big into bios. So my Audible pick for this month, this week, whatever amount of time it's going to take you to listen to it, I think you can listen to it in about a week, is The Man Who Knew Infinity, A Life of the Genius Ramanujan. And this book is amazing. It is about an Indian clerk who is a math genius and who filled 3 or 4 books with math theories and formulas that today inform how we interpret black holes, and a true genius who then went to England to study. And it is being made into a film, which I was lucky enough to just see. And it's got Jeremy Irons and Dave Patel in it. It is an amazing, and Stephen Fry, and just an all-star cast. And I just saw this movie, and it is very powerful and a great, great film. And, making math, interesting, very hard to do. And there's a lot of these people who did seminal, incredible work, and you would never know them. The book is by Robert Kangle, and I actually saw the author speak with the director recently at a screening. And I, immediately when I got invited to the screening, I said to myself, I'm going to go to a screening for this book, but I want to go deeper. I always want to know not just the 90-minute or 120-minute version, but I like to read the original source material, and I like to listen to it. I'm constantly in the car. I'm driving between things. Sometimes I got to take my daughter to a kid's party, and then there's other parents there. I don't want to talk to them, so I pretend I'm on a conference call. Really, I'm listening to an Audible book while the kids are playing. The kids don't want to be involved with the parents, but the parents don't want to talk to me about some crazy nonsense. I just say, I got to go make a phone call. I secretly listen to a little bit of Audible. So go check out The Man Who Knew Infinity. It is an amazing audiobook, and it is going to get my highest recommendation. Of course, if you're not into bios, there are a ton of other interesting books. One I'm reading on my hikes through the NorCal mountains is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, who is I believe a New York University media kind of Marshall McLuhan type professor. And Amusing Ourselves to Death is my backup here. If you want to listen to an amazing book from 1985 about media and media theory and television versus the printed word in newspapers, and before that books, and how illiterate and how television has become a huge nonsensical mess. We are actually amusing ourselves to death. If you look at what's happening in this election this year, this is a really interesting book to go back and listen to, especially. And the way I wound up wanting to listening to Amusing Ourselves to Death was I had Keith Raboy at the Launch Festival. You may have heard that episode here. And he just mentioned casually, like when I was asking him about Donald Trump and Cruz and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, he said, it reminds me of this incredible book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't read that. And this is one of the things I love about audiobooks is, sometimes you get older, you're 30 years old, you're 40 years old, you're 50 years old. You're supposed to have read some books. You're supposed to be an expert. Listen, I'm supposed to be an expert on media and technology. I never read Amusing Ourselves to Death. I may have read a chapter or two when I was younger on the book. And now I have Audible. I listen to it on my hikes. I go for a 2-hour hike. I knock out 2 out of the 7 hours. Boom, I got another hike, wipe out another 2 or 3 hours, go to the gym. I reward myself when I exercise with Audible. I reward myself when I'm driving with Audible. I like to make myself smarter. Thank you so much to our friends at Audible for supporting this episode. Get a free audiobook right now, like The Man Who Knew Infinity or Amusing Ourselves to Death. And you can just go to audible.com/twist, audible.com/twist. Some of my past recommendations, The Hobbit, read by Robert Inglis, is amazing. My daughter and I love listening to that. We've listened to the first 3 chapters over and over again because she likes certain scenes, like when the dwarfs are singing and breaking plates. And then before that, I did Building Great Sentences because you guys know I sold my book and it will be on Audible at some point next year. And I wanted to write better sentences, so I got this Building Great Sentences, and it's really helped me do better sentences in my writing. And you can access your stuff from iPhones, iPad, Android, Windows, all that. What's really interesting is I have an iPad, I have my phone, and a lot of times I'll go from my iPad to my phone and it remembers where I was. So if you forget, and my phone died on the hike, then I plugged in my iPad and I was listening on my deck, it remembered where I was and it caught me up when I was listening to Amusing Ourselves to Death. 180,000 titles in every genre, and they're doing some really interesting stuff with channels and podcasting. There's a bunch of stuff going on with Audible that you'll read about in the news. They're just an amazing company. I love it. Download my book of the week for free by signing up at audible.com/twist. You can only get that free book by going to audible.com/TWIST, and they love to see you do that. So make sure you tell your mom, your dad, your cousin, your brother, your sons, your daughters, your friends, your enemies. Tell them to go to audible.com/twist and get a free book. The Man Who Knew Infinity, a great, great listen. And Amusing Ourselves to Death, another great listen. Okay, let's get back to this amazing interview.